So, as everybody can obviously tell from the fact that I am not in my normal studio, I have been traveling this week. I'm at a legal conference out in Las Vegas. And so I'm trying to get caught up and make sure I've covered every important story of the week. And that's why this story that's technically from Sunday, I'm having to talk about it today. So, the New York Times on Sunday posted a very comprehensive article talking about the dangers of Donald Trump's increasing mental instability, marking, of course, the first time, really, that the New York Times has dedicated so much ink to talking about Donald Trump's mental problems. This is the same paper that for months has still been talking about President Biden is slipping in his old age, but they have mostly avoided talking about all of Donald Trump's comprehensive problems. But they tried to make amends for it with this article this past Sunday, and I gotta say, to their credit, they did a phenomenal job. So let me read you some of these excerpts here. Anyone can misremember, of course, and they were talking in this context about Trump claiming just days after his debate with Harris that there was an audience there, which of course there wasn't. But the debate had been just a week earlier and a fairly memorable moment, and it was hardly the only time Mr. Trump has seemed confused, forgetful, incoherent, or disconnected from reality lately. In fact, it happens so often these days that it no longer even generates much attention. Yeah, because you guys don't give it the attention it deserves. So I don't know if you're calling out your own media outlet or just saying like, we don't even really care about it, but I guess now we have to. Yeah, it kind of sounds like a cell phone there. But they continue. He rambles, he repeats himself, he roams from thought to thought, some of them hard to understand, some of them unfinished, some of them factually fantastical. He voices outlandish claims that seem to be made up out of whole cloth. He digresses into bizarre tangents about golf, about sharks, about his own beautiful body. He relishes, quote, a great day in Louisiana after spending the day in Georgia. He expresses fear that North Korea is trying to kill me when he presumably means Iran. As late as last month, Mr. Trump was still speaking as if he were running against President Biden 5 weeks after his withdrawal from the race. And then they get into the meat of it, right? It's not just the misremembering. It's the personality changes that also, by the way, are symptoms of severe neurological problems. But here's what they say. They note, New York Times does, that his rally speeches now last an average of 82 minutes compared to 45 minutes in 2016. He also uses curse words 69% more frequently than he did in his first presidential campaign, which, by the way, is something I have pointed out a lot recently just to show how his anger has taken over. Trump used to never swear. Now he swears a lot. But they continue. Proportionately, he uses 13% more all or nothing terms like always and never than he did 8 years ago, which some experts consider a sign of advancing age. Similar, he uses 32% more negative words than positive words now, compared with 21% in 2016, which can be another indicator of cognitive change. Cognitive change. See, even in this article where they're talking about how bad his brain is, they're still attempting a little bit of sane washing. But they continue. Experts said it was hard to judge whether the changes in Mr. Trump's speaking style could indicate typical effects of age or some more significant condition. That can change with normal aging, but if you see a change relative to a person's baseline and that type of speaking ability over the course of just a few years, I think it raises some real red flags, said Dr. Bradford Dickerson, a neurologist at Harvard Medical School. His speeches in 2015 and 2016 were more aggressive, but still clearer and more comprehensible than now, and balanced with flashes of humor. Now, his rallies are powered as much by anger as anything else. His distortions and false claims have reached new levels. His adversaries are lunatics and deranged and communists and fascists. Never particularly restrained, he now lobs four-letter words and other profanities far more freely. The other day, he suggested unleashing the police to inflict one really violent day on criminals to deter crime. But again, at least the New York Times, biggest paper in the country, is finally talking about it. which is what we have all been begging the media to do for months, because this is a serious issue that voters need to be aware of. And in fact, other media outlets that have been calling on the New York Times to do this, they took time out of their week to praise the New York Times, hopefully, to maybe urge them to do a little bit more every now and then, like, hey, you guys did great, keep going. Here's what Michael Tomasky of the New Republic wrote. The gist of the piece argues, with statistical analyses of Trump's tropes and speech patterns, that his rhetoric is very different from what it was in 2015 and 2016. Which is to say, it's worse in every way. More long-winded, more disconnected, more rambling, also coarser, far more prone to swearing. In sum, the article is devastating about whether Trump, who is now the old one in the race and who would be 82 at the end of a second term, is simply incapable on a mental level of doing the job of president. I hope the Times keeps finding more ways to raise this question, and I hope other mainstream outlets follow, Tomasky says. The first part of that equation shouldn't be hard for the simple reason that Trump will keep cranking out material. This isn't just a question of lies, it's a question of whether he's all there in the head. And to be honest, that's why I do a lot of the segments about the crazy things Trump says, about his mental decline. I know at times it can feel repetitive. It seems like I'm just saying the same thing every couple of days. But it's because we get new evidence every couple of days. And the rest of the media, the corporate media, I should say, they're not talking about it in the way that they should. But this article from the New York Times, a month out from the election when it was published, this is a big step forward. I wish they would have started doing this 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year ago, because they could have. And that's the problem. You waited a month before the election when you could have been talking about this for a year or even 2 years, maybe 3 or 4. Instead, you wait until most people have already made up their minds about who they're going to vote for. So, you kind of dropped the ball on it. You put out a really decent article. I'm not going to say really good, but it was really decent. You had a couple attempts at sane washing that I completely disagree with. You used soft language when you should have gone a little bit harsher. But you finally did the job itself. And you didn't do a bad job of it. The only problem is voters needed this information months ago. And today, voters need this information from more than just a one-hit piece on a Sunday in the New York Times. They need it from CNN. They need it from MSNBC. They need it from all of us doing this on YouTube, which, by the way, they're getting that. No doubt about it. But the mainstream media outlets reach more than the left of YouTube could ever reach. And they're the ones that have dropped the ball. And hopefully, this New York Times piece is a way of finally picking it up and carrying it to the finish line by finally addressing Donald Trump's multiple mental problems.